Well, good morning and welcome to our first meeting in December, and we hope everyone enjoyed your holiday break, and hopefully everyone found something to be thankful for. So good to have you this morning. We will jump in here. I hope you didn't break any speed laws getting here.
No, sitting on Keller for 40 minutes, I didn't break any.
It's a parking lot out there?
Yes.
All right, hopefully no one got hurt. We'll call our meeting to order this morning, and with that, we have Catherine Nellie Burton of Grace Presbyterian Church that's going to provide an invocation. Following the invocation, we will have a pledge of allegiance and invite you to join us for both. Great to have you this morning.
Thank you. Let us pray. Gracious God, by day and night, we pour out our prayer to you. We thank you for this city we call home. We thank you for all who serve here, for teachers, police officers, social workers, and elected officials. As a city, we cry out for your justice, and we long for your peace, and we say, come quickly to help us, O God. Gracious God, keep us working and praying for the day when your justice will roll down like waters, and your righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Replenish our strength and stir up our hope as we look for signs of your coming reign. And fill us with the peace that passes understanding. We pray all of this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that invocation. We appreciate you being here, and our next item is to approve the minutes of November 26th, 2019. Any changes or corrections? Seeing none, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of November 26th.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have a couple of proclamations this morning.
We have the group from Kenya's 56th Independence Day.
Come on.
Come on up.
Don't be shy.
They didn't want to join you?
Miguisman, next
There
door
we
neighbor.
go.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, no.
Do you all not like him that much?
Morning, Harry.
Good morning. Good morning. Morning. Good morning. So you're also then fairly close to my nephew, the neighbor of Cameron.
Whereas the prosperity of this community and the area is enhanced by immigrants and the various countries, and whereas immigrants from Kenya provide a positive contribution to the economy and well-being of this city and the area, and especially so in the medical and healthcare fields, and whereas the Wichita Kenyan Community Incorporated is a welfare organization duly registered in Kansas and the United States of America, and whereas Wichitans of Kenyan descent would like to celebrate Kenya's 56th Independence Day, now therefore be it resolved that Mayor Jeff Longwell, the mayor of the city of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim December 7th, 2019 as Kenya's 56th birthday in the city of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to remember the contribution of the immigrants from Kenya in our city and our country.
Thank you very much, Mayor Longwell, Vice Mayor Jeff Bobo, council members. My name is Megu Karugu. I'm the president of the Wichita Kenyan community. We are a vibrant 600-member community of Wichitans with a Kenyan heritage. Our organization is fully registered social welfare group in the state of Kansas and the USA. Our main objective is to help those ones of us who immigrate to this great country get a proper and solid footing as they settle down in their new environment, which, to say the least, is usually very challenging and can be traumatic at times due to the dramatic cultural changes. This is a proud day for Wichita Kenyans for the recognition our city and county is giving us on the great occasion of celebrating Kenya's 56 years of independence. Kenya and America share a heritage in that in some years gone by, we were all part of the British Empire, where the sun never set due to the many colonies and territories scattered all over the globe that were under the Queen's rule. Kenya got its independence from Britain on December 12, 1963, a mere 187 years after America did the same. Wichitans of Kenyan origin, a hard-working and vibrant people, are to be found in all areas of social and economic fabric of this great city. More so in the healthcare fields, where they render their services with great dedication and pride. Here in our city, we have numerous home health companies owned and managed by Wichitans of Kenyan origin. We are very proud of our city and the opportunities that it has offered us. We promise to give back in the same way and become an integrated part of this great city and country. We will be having a dinner to celebrate this great day at the Hyatt Hotel this Saturday from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. You are all invited to come and join us as we celebrate this great day. Authentic Kenyan dishes will be on offer. Thank you again for this recognition. We do not take it for granted. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll do multiple. Go ahead.
So our next proclamation is for the Salvation Army's Red Kettle Restore Hope campaign, and I'm bringing down their best bell ringer to read this proclamation. Councilmember Fry has rung the bell multiple years wearing his Wichita flag suit, which gets a lot of attention. And so, Councilmember Fry, I'm gonna turn this proclamation over to you.
Straight ahead. There we go. There we go. I don't think I can match this suit, though. This is Captain Kettle, everyone. So this is a proclamation by the city of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870. Whereas the Salvation Army is the single largest provider of social services of its kind in the United States, arriving in Wichita in 1886 to feed the hungry, clothe the poor, and bring hope to the dispirited. And whereas the Wichita City Command and its area corps, as part of the Kansas and Western Missouri region, helps more than 294,000, providing millions of meals, tens of thousands of nights of shelter, and a wide range of other critical services to the less fortunate each year for our neighbors who have nowhere else to turn for help. And whereas as the seasons change, so does the Salvation Army efforts to provide families and educators school supplies, distributing coats and winter wear to keep citizens safe from the elements, to keeping first responders hydrated amidst disaster or fire at a moment's notice. Whereas young and old alike devote thousands of volunteer hours distributing food monthly from their unique client choice food pantry, to providing thousands of nights of shelter or the loving guidance when fear consumes those considering hopeless situations. And whereas community businesses and organizations allow the Salvation Army to use their sites this time of year with red kettles to collect money for the less fortunate in our community. Now, therefore, it be resolved that Mayor Jeff Longwell, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of November and December, I should have said months, of November and December, as the Salvation Army's Red Kettle Restore Hope Christmas campaign, and call upon the people of Wichita to acknowledge the importance of the work of the Salvation Army to do the most good every day of the year. Yeah, so gonna let the Major have a few words.
Oh, I thought the kettle was going to speak.
Just go ahead, do what you do. There we go.
The kettle doesn't speak, which is a good thing, and if you know the inner workings of the kettle, it's always a good thing not to have the kettle talk. But it's really great. I'm Major Jim Curl of Wichita. I'm the city commander. I've been here for just over a year and a half now, and I want to tell you that I'm pleased as Punch to be part of the Wichita community. I am amazed at what you do. I'm amazed at how you serve. I'm amazed at how you come alongside agencies like the Salvation Army to meet the needs of people without discrimination. That makes a difference. It's a shortened fundraising season for us this year. I would encourage you to look for the kettles on the street and help fill them up as they go. It's important to do that. In addition, if you want to drop a check off by the office, we accept checks as well. And my joke at the kettle is I also take credit cards, and I give them back when I'm done. We want to thank you very much. It is our honor to serve with you, alongside you in this city, and pray God's blessing upon you for this Christmas season. Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, you want to call the next item, please?
George Theo Harris, Cats, Dogs, and Trash.
Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Legal. Cats, survey on feral cats posted by me with 98 threads on Nextdoor. We were almost force-fed a TNR program by the WPD and a non-understanding animal board. TNR is needed in some fashion, just not what they rolled out. The bottom line is, do you want your neighbor and any and all of your neighbors to have the legal ability to have up to 8 feral cats in their backyards? This is the only question. They paraded their dog and pony show to all 6 dabs, and it hadn't been for some caring people looking out for Wichita citizens' best interests, this could have become law. It is going to be revisited soon. The majority needs to get out ahead of this before your neighbor legally has their cats roaming onto your property, at which time you can call in a nuisance complaint to Animal Services with the realization they barely get to all level 1 and 2 calls, so how quickly will they get to a non-priority nuisance call? Don't let it happen. Let's not let a niche small group dictate to the majority of the citizens. It's not about loving and caring cat owners, it's about the rights of the majority, nothing more. We might be having a series of meetings, and we are hoping James Clendening could get it set up. I will be there as an impartial citizen, as I'm a guy who grew up with cats and loved them, although not a fan of wild squirrels. District 5 DAB was the only DAB which passed this proposed TNR ordinance. Mr. Henry? Could you please have the water tested over there in District 5? Seriously, any and all neighbors could legally have 8 feral cats? Hopefully we can come to some sort of compromise and present it to the mayor and city council. I'm hoping not to be impeached over this. Dogs. Dog bites and attacks are up, and there needs to be ads on TV and radio and in the Eagle to get this under control. Our legal system needs to quit waiving shall fees. The Postal Service was around 10th in the nation a few short years ago, and their fiscal year just ended September 30th. With A little clock came up, kind of scared me. With only 5 bites and attacks from 27 in their worst year. It's time we put our money where our mouths are, like the postmaster, and get this citizen base educated on proper dog care. Offloading part or any of the services at Animal Services is not fiscally sound unless it can be proven to save the city money, and if not, then let's not fix something that is not broken. Please budget for more animal service officers. Trash carts at the street. A sweet lady posted this on Nextdoor about trash carts, 148 threads. Here are our sampling. Hi, dear neighbor. I know this seems to be small potatoes with all the other issues in the world, but it would be so nice if folks removed their trash cans from the curb at the end of the trash pickup day. It looks bad when they sit out all week. Let's take pride in our neighborhoods. Thank you so much. Then there was a bunch of back and forth about if it was property and to mind our own business. Honestly, then one person wrote, honestly, tired of hearing about these dumb trash cans. How about it's not your property, not anything you can do about it. Have a nice day. Not anything you can do about it? Sounded like a dare to me. I talked with Chris Labram, director of MABCD, and he said we could start some dialogue and hopefully get some relief on the subject. He's a get-her-done kind of guy. I wish the ones below him were also. Set it up like the tall weeds and grass and give more than one notice, maybe a couple or 3, then start finding 20 to 25 per occurrence, and I guarantee you it'll stop. Fireworks. I recently saw an online survey, and there was only 3,000 of 393,000 people who took the survey. That's less than 1%. This is maybe a good first step, but let's put it on the ballot and get a much higher percentage in 2020 and let them have the say. Remember me, the majority should rule, not the minority. Let's not forget PTSD citizens, aforementioned cats and dogs, and working people. 9 days is too long. People can't afford food and clothing for their children, but yet they become Rockefellers for those 9 days. Last I read, it was 52.5 want state rules, and so on and so forth. A bonus 5th item, Harry Street overlay. We have waited very long on Harry Street from Oliver to Hillside to be redone due to all the potholes. Finally, before the November elections, it finally finished, and it looks and dries marvelously. Thanks, James Clendenner and Mayor Longwell, for this.
Thank you, George. Madam Clerk, next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 9.
Any items need to be pulled on consent agenda for discussion or clarification? Seeing none, I move that we approve the consent agenda items 1 through 9.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Board of Bids and Contracts.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Melinda Walker, Purchasing Manager. For engineering bids today, we have KDOT Redbud Multi-Use Path, K96 to 159th, defer to December 16th. KDOT 17th Street Broadway to I-35, defer to December 16th. Aquatics Master Plan Phase 1A is to reject all bids. KDOT Mount Vernon Road Broadway to Southeast Boulevard, defer until December 9th. Aquatics Master Plan Phase 1B, reject all bids. For purchasing, we have meters, replacement parts, and ERTs. Recommendation is Midwest Meter, Groups 1, 2, 4, and then Master Meter, Group 3, Itron Inc., Group 5. And you can see your bid report has the itemized pricing. This is an annual contract. We have a 4-wheel rubber-tired loader backhoe, Murphy tractor, base bid, with options 3, 5, and 6 for an aggregate total of $147,879.38. And a 33,000 GVWR cabin chassis with grapple. Recommendation defer to December 9th, 2019. And our open requests for proposals to date are playground surfacing, data link analysis software, extended stay providers for RAD, On-call consulting services, vehicle fleet information, CDBG Youth Crime Prevention, Home Investment Partnership, Emergency Solutions Grant, and on-call plumbing repair services. And if you would like to become with a registered vendor, visit our city's e-procurement website listed there, or call the purchasing office. And a recommendation is to approve the bid award as recommended.
Any questions? Mr. Manager, I know this is the second time we've rejected all the bids on the aquatics. You have any idea when potentially that's going to come together?
I've got staff prepared to talk about that.
Okay.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Troy Halpin, Director of Parks and Recreation. And actually, this is the first time that we've rejected bids, because this is the first time we've gone out to bids for the Aquatics Master Plan. And I think we have a PowerPoint. Okay. So usually I bring very good news, but today, unfortunately, I have bad news in regards to the Aquatics Master Plan and the bids that we received for bids Phase 1 and 1A and 1B. So what we actually are looking at is a total here in this slide in regards to Phase 1, and then the bids that we received for Phase 1, which includes 1A and 1B. So we were told the total over the budget, we were $1.8 million over. So for Phase 1A, Pools, McAdams, for Ailey, Adams, and Orchard, we were basically $1.3 million over, or 21% over the estimated budget. And the main factors for these is in regards to the scheduling and the materials. Scheduling, we were talking to our contractors about this, and the expedited schedule to get everything done by the middle of May was really difficult for a lot of them. We only got one bid, and that was Donlinger, because they can self-perform. We actually did pre-qualifications with the contractors, and we had 3 subcontractors that specifically do pools, and they did not bid on this because they could not meet this time frame. The other reason is because of the materials that are involved with this. This is a pretty large project, very complicated project, so to get the pumps, the filters, the disinfectant systems all in place and get them ordered, specifically that many at one time, is going to be really difficult. For simplification and for maintenance, we decided to go with the same brand on all of them, and also with Phase 2 as well. So that's just causing us a really difficult situation. So with only having one bidder, it was really kind of difficult to accept just one bid. With Phase 1B, which is the splash pads, we were almost $500,000 over budget, and many of the same factors that we had with the pools. We did get 2 bidders, but Donlinger was the lowest and was still nearly $500,000 over. So some of the options is to accept the low bid and value engineer. One of the things that this would do would not let us complete Phase 2 projects. That $1.8 million is equivalent to 1 swimming pool or 2 splash pads. So we'd really need to sit down and kind of figure out what we're going to prioritize. And the original schedule still would not be met, more than likely. I'm not sure how Donlinger thinks they can get it done when we have several other contractors that we talked to, and they said it was next to impossible. Reject the bids and rebid as soon as it's possible. This gives us a couple different options. We can reprioritize the pools, we can reprioritize some of the other items and value engineer what we need to get done. Unfortunately, this would make us only have 3 swimming pools for next summer. We could possibly change some things around if we change the order of splash pads and swimming pools, and might be able to bring 1 swimming pool forward and 1 swimming pool into one splash pad into Phase 2. So these are some of the things that we're looking at, but this was a drastic amount of dollars that we were overbid, and we just weren't expecting that. So those are some of the facts that were behind this situation.
Do we know why the design took so long?
So we did a lot of community engagement. That took a lot extra long longer time. We changed our scope from 4 pools to 6 pools, so the designer had to change that. Fortunately, we had a designer that was working with us and didn't charge us anything extra for that. So we changed the scope of the work, and then the artistic design also took a long time as well. So all those factors combined to make it push it back a little bit further. We really wanted to get started sometime in the summer, but I think having good community engagement was really important. That was something that we spent a lot of time on, and we made sure that everybody knew exactly what we were going to be getting. Changing the scope from 4 pools to 6 pools was a major change as well, and bringing on the artists is something that was really important as well. We wanted to get them involved, and they did a great job on getting us some great artistic designs in this plan.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Troy, on the companies that kind of struggled with this completion date, did they give you a completion date that would work? So if it wasn't May 2020, would it be like July 2020?
They did not give us a completion date because they didn't even put in a bid other than Dollinger. And so who knows? I mean, if we go out to rebid, I think those are some of the things that we can talk about in regards to extending the completion time and talking about liquidated damages, maybe reduce a lot of those so that they're not worried about having to pay those penalties. But realistically, I don't think it would be completed by the end of the summer. So I consider this a lot like East Kellogg, where we were inconvenienced for several years, but we ended up getting a great product at the end, and I think this could kind of be the same thing if we do this the right way. Obviously, we'll be inconvenienced this next summer by having 3 or 4 pools open, but we know that we'll have some great projects.
Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. So I understand what happened. I just want to encourage us to, as we're thinking about this, to think about if we have to close pools and we're going to be without a pool for a season, to think about what makes sense there. Could we leave some of the older pools open if we're not going to get to them at all? Some of these neighborhoods are, going to be without that. And I understand your analogy with East Kellogg. That's
Well, we'll definitely do that. I think we have going to set up some time to really review and come up with a good plan and share that with you guys. We don't have anything in the works yet, but as I mentioned earlier, we might be able to switch a pool with a splash pad from phase 1 to phase 2. That might give us some flexibility. We definitely want to make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences when we make our decisions, so we want to vet everything out very well.
Yeah. So I appreciate you looking out for the neighborhoods.
You bet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I move that we award the bids as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item.
Amendments to section 2.04.190 of the Code of the City of Wichita regarding the order of council business consent agenda.
Mayor, members of council, this is a continuation of an item that was presented to you originally on November 19th. Has to do with policy governing the items that appear on the consent agenda, and also then what appears on the new business agenda resulting from those policy changes. Whole idea, this came to light several months ago. Council had some concerns about items that had been on the consent agenda, and of course, the guidelines that are in the ordinance today are pretty vague, and so the process is very subjective. And the recommendations we're bringing forward today are attempting to bring more clarity to the process on how an item gets on the consent agenda. Let me just skip right ahead to the listing of items that would be on the consent agenda. This would provide guidance to the staff about what items are appropriate and considered to be routine enough to be on a consent agenda. And then there's actually a second page of those items that's also included in the ordinance and in your council report. The other part of this ordinance is to introduce a review process that reviews the work of staff and the recommendations, the preliminary recommendations of what's on a consent agenda. The week before, the Tuesday before the council meeting, the preliminary agenda would be presented to the mayor and vice mayor, and they would have the ability to recommend any items that currently are scheduled on consent agenda to be moved to new business. That was an issue of discussion at the last council meeting, and so I've inserted some language to clarify that we're only dealing with items that are on the consent agenda and their movement to the new business agenda, not any other changes in the order of items or whether items can be pulled and not placed on the agenda at all. Ultimately, though, even the work done by the mayor and vice mayor results in the preparation of a draft agenda, and that's not finalized until the council sees it and has an opportunity to act on it on Friday during your normal agenda review. At that time, we would consider the agenda closed, and then the only changes in the consent agenda would be require a majority of the council members to move an item. So with that, I stand for any questions regarding the change in policy to govern the items to appear on a consent agenda.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Any more discussion on or clarity on this? Hopefully we have a better understanding now of what can be the parameters of what should go on the consent agenda. And if there's no other discussion, I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public hearing and issuance of industrial revenue bonds, Air Capital Flight Line LLC.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City's Office of Economic Development for the record. The item before you today is consideration of the issuance of industrial revenue bonds for Air Capital Flight Line LLC for the benefit of Spirit Aerosystems. On November 13th of last year, Air Capital Flight Line LLC was approved for a new letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $18 million for the construction of a 144,000 square foot manufacturing facility that would be leased to Spirit Aerosystems. On this aerial, you can see outlined in red the area that represents Spirit's campus on South Oliver, and the area outlined in green is the Air Capital Flight Line facility. Air Capital Flight Line was established in 2014 to acquire the former Boeing facilities on Oliver between 31st and 47th Street South, which is directly to the east of Spirit Aerosystems. Air Capital Flight Line built a new 144,000 square foot manufacturing facility that it will be leasing to Spirit. Spirit has committed to 320 net new jobs as a result of this project at an average annual salary of $54,500. You can see here the various buildings located at Air Capital Flight Line, and as we get in a little closer here on the north side of the Air Capital Flight Line facility, you can see the
and job numbers are up in the city, crime goes down, other things that are negative go down, and good things continue to happen. And so we appreciate Spirit being one of those positive driving forces in our community, and the things that you do. And I also want to thank the workers who work out at Spirit, because they're quality people that live in this city, and you wouldn't be able to get them anywhere else in the world. So thank you for being here. That being said, I'm going to make a motion that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds in the amount not to exceed $18 million for Air Capital Flight Line LLC, and authorize the necessary signatures.
And I will second that. And before I call the vote, I want to add one thing, Councilmember Clinton, and just in case people forget, that when Spirit invests these kinds of dollars and adds these kinds of workers in our community, it doesn't just mean jobs at Spirit. Often you can calculate nearly a 3 or 4 to 1 increase in jobs in the city because of the jobs that they're adding in a wide variety of sectors, including folks that do business with Spirit, and then in the service sector in this community. And so we say 300 jobs, 22.45 to 1 return on investment, but it could really be calculated more than that. And I hope the community fully understands and appreciates that, because it really does mean more to the community than just the jobs that you see today added. So again, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. Sam, thank you. Take a break next week. Bring your millions the following week. But we certainly do appreciate you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Resolution setting a public hearing for consideration of a project plan tax increment financing for the Union Station Project Area 3 plan.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. Mark Elder with the Office of Economic Development. The item for you today is a request just to set a public hearing for January 7th regarding a project plan for Phase 3 of the Union Station redevelopment. The district was established in 2014, and we've already done Phase 1 and Phase 2 for this project plan. The overall district is approximately 10 acres. It does include the redevelopment of the Union Station and those buildings. The original development was intended to be just 3 phases, but in October of this year, City Council expanded the district to include the Ice House building, which is now the Phase 3, which would expand the overall project or plans for the development of this area to 4 phases. The area here you see here is the overall redevelopment district. That kind of box off to the right is the area that was expanded earlier this year, and that's the Phase 3 there in the red box. Phase 3 is approximately half an acre. It includes the redevelopment of the Ice House, the old Ice House building. It would be, when all done, a 40,000 square foot mixed space, primarily office. It's 27,000 square feet of existing space with an additional 13,000 of new construction on that. The TIF plan would also include the infrastructure around that with the new sidewalks, streets, amenities, and landscaping. It's estimated that this project plan would be around $317,000 for that earthwork and the site improvements that are TIF related. This would all be pay-as-you-go. And just a few renderings of the Ice House building. This, I believe, is the east side, or I think is flipped around there west, and then the east side of the entrance. And so again, this is just setting the public hearing for January 7th. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll bring discussion back to the bench, and not trying to be too punny, but your district's getting a lot cooler, Councilmember Johnson.
It is, I agree.
I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I will move that the City Council adopt the resolution setting a public hearing on January 7th, 2020 for consideration of the Union Station Project Area 3 plan and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public hearing and issuance of industrial revenue bonds, Textron Aviation.
Again, Mayor and City Council members, Tim Goodpasture with the Office of Economic Development for the record. The next item is a request for the actual issuance of industrial revenue bonds for Textron Aviation. On February 13th of 2018, the City Council approved a letter of intent, a 5-year letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds for Textron Aviation in an amount not to exceed $434,800,000 with a 5+5-year 100% property tax abatement. In 2019, the company has invested approximately $95,500,000, which included over $73 million in tooling and equipment and over $21 million, almost $22 million in real property improvements. These are some of the photos of just some of the improvements that have been made. On the East Campus, which is the former Beechcraft campus, you can see on the left a before and after photo of an additive manufacturing lab. And then you can see some of the improvements on the right there to the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems to that campus. On the Pawnee campus, the company invested in information technology as well as machining. And on the West campus, which is at Eisenhower Airport, again, HVAC improvements as well as a new hangar door. These are just some of the improvements that were made to that facility. A cost-benefit analysis was conducted by the Center for Economic Development and Business Research at the time of the approval of the letter of intent, which showed an overall ratio of benefits to cost to the city of 3.26 to 1 overall, 1.05 to 1 for the city's general fund, and 1.56 to 1 for Sedgwick County. Therefore, it is the staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing and place on first reading the bond ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of documents for the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $95,500,000 and release and convey the 2016 bond financed property and authorize the necessary signatures. Steve Hall, who is the Senior Associate General Counsel, and Doug Scott, who is the Manager of Government Relations and Public Affairs for Textron Aviation, are here and can answer any questions specific to the company, and I would be happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions for Tim at this point? Seeing none, before I go out, I just want to say thank you again to Textron. It's not a competition. We only require 1.3 to 1, and we're one of the few communities that require at least a 1.3 to 1 return on investment. But Mr. Scott, Spirit kind of set the bar on that return on investment. We appreciate you more than tripling our 1.3 to 1 and appreciate what you're doing also for Wichita. I'll ask if there's anyone that would like to address the council on this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench, and this crosses multiple districts, but Vice Mayor, you worked at Textron at one time.
Sure, about 17 years I've been out there, and it is an exciting environment, and just what you said, Mayor, it's the thing a lot of people don't realize, every one of these jobs, it's 3 jobs out there for suppliers, so it's pretty big impact for Wichita, seeing the investment just this morning that we've discussed with the aerospace. So I want to take the recommended action to place the ordinance and authorize the renewal and extension of the industrial districts I'm on the other one, aren't I? Take the recommended action to close the public hearing and place on the first reading.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Another really good thing for Wichita and Wichita workers, Wichita companies, and it just strengthens our hold on being the air capital of the world, so thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Industrial Districts Non-Annexation Agreement, Textron Aviation.
Again, Mayor and council members, Tim Goodpasture with the city's Office of Economic Development. The next item before you is consideration of a non-annexation agreement in the industrial districts for Textron Aviation. Industrial districts were established by Sedgwick County at the request of the city in 1979 and 1980. Cessna had 2 facilities that were included in an industrial district. Beechcraft had 1, and then Boeing had 1 as well. The industrial districts run in perpetuity. Once they were established, the company would have to petition to have the industrial districts canceled. So they run in perpetuity, and all of the industrial districts are in Sedgwick County. After creation of the industrial districts by the county, the city agreed with the companies to a non-annexation agreement. The purpose of the non-annexation agreement was to foster economic growth. The non-annexation agreement ensures that no city ad valorem taxes on real property improvements will be assessed within the districts for the term of the agreement and any renewals or extensions thereof. In May of 1979, the city approved a non-annexation agreement for Cessna for 2 of its facilities, the Wallace facility, which is what the facility at Eisenhower Airport is named, and the Pawnee facility, which is on Pawnee between Rock and Woodlawn on the south side of Pawnee. In August of that same year, Beechcraft was approved for a non-annexation agreement. In 2014, Textron acquired Beechcraft, which already owned Cessna, and rolled both Cessna and Beechcraft into Textron Aviation. So today, Textron Aviation owns all 3 of these facilities. Non-annexation agreements run for 20 years, which is the maximum under state law. In 1999, the Wallace, Pawnee, and Beechcraft facilities were renewed for their non-annexation agreement. Textron Aviation is now requesting renewal of the non-annexation agreement for an additional 20 years. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council place the ordinance authorizing the renewal and extension of the industrial district's non-annexation agreement with Textron Aviation on first reading and authorize the necessary signatures. Again, Steve Hall, the Senior Associate General Counsel, and Doug Scott, the Manager of Government Relations and Public Affairs, are here on behalf of Textron Aviation, and I would be happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll go out to the audience. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? If you'd like to address the council, come to the podium.
I'm Sybil Drum. I reside at 326 North Walnut, finally. What does whatever that, annexation, whatever agreement mean?
Means that they'll remain in the county.
All right, thank you.
Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench. And before I hand this one over to the Vice Mayor, I want to echo a little bit what Sam Sackett said. So maybe encourage Textron to take Sam out to lunch because he said it best. It's about being in an environment where you can be competitive. And when we look at the kinds of returns on investment that we get from you being here, we have to ensure that you're in an environment where you can be competitive. So we're going to make sure that we provide you tremendously skilled workers, but we're also going to provide you an environment that allows you to be competitive, because the reality of it is Textron, Spirit, name any of them, they could pick up shop tomorrow, and there are dozens of communities that would love to have these companies setting in their yard. And so we're fortunate to get them to continue to expand their footprint here, but part of it is continuing those things that have allowed you to be competitive to continue, as mentioned, in perpetuity. And so this is just one opportunity to do that. So Vice Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to take the recommended action to place the ordinance authorizing the renewal and extension of the industrial district's non-annexation agreement with Textron Aviation on the first reading and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Economic Development Grant to Passageways.
Good morning, Mayor, Council Scott Rigby, City of Wichita. We have still some outstanding items that we're working through with WSU and Passageways, and at this time we request that we pull the item.
So we need to defer 1 week enough, or what do you need?
Mayor, I would like to defer to the first meeting in January, if that's possible. I want a little more time to work with WSU, and I want to make sure we get it right.
All right, fair enough. Any questions on that? Well, I would move we defer this item to the first meeting in January.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item.
Northwest Wichita Water Facility and 2020 rate increases.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. For the record, I'm Don Henry, Assistant Director of Public Works and Utilities. First, I'd like to say that it is a heartfelt privilege to present to you this morning on behalf of Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities. The items before you this morning include the path forward on the Northwest Water Treatment Facility and the recommended rate adjustments for fiscal year 2020. Just in quick review of the project background for the Northwest Wichita Water Facility. As council is well aware, city staff, Wichita Water Partners, the city's progressive design build partner, and Garver Engineering, the owner's rep, have been busy throughout most of 2019 working on a progressive design build project to replace the city's aging water treatment plant with a brand new state-of-the-art, fully redundant 120 million gallon a day water treatment facility. The project works to combine a progressive design build approach and favorable financing terms to hold costs down and minimize rate impacts. The Water Infrastructure and Finance Innovation Act is a federal program administered by the U.S. EPA that provides low fixed interest rates and a highly desirable deferred repayment option. The State Revolving Loan Fund program is administered by the Kansas Department of Health and Environment and provides the lowest interest rate available, as well as deferred repayment options. The progressive design build approach will provide project savings through the progressive design process, value engineering, a lower guaranteed maximum price, and optimized O&M savings. Review of the activities in 2019 included the approval of the Phase 1 contract with Wichita Water Partners to complete the 30% design phase, to complete environmental work and permitting, provide assistance with the WIFIA application, and develop the GMP. Council approved the Phase 1 contract with Garver Engineering for owner's rep services on April the 9th, and the preliminary GMP was provided to the city on September the 12th. A period for September and October, city and the city staff and the design team really took the time to drill down and go through a deliberate process of value engineering and optimization to lower the project costs and the GMP. And then on October the 11th, Wichita Water Partners provided the project updates, the cost reductions, an overview of the proposed plant design to the Oversight Steering Committee in an open public meeting on the 11th. October 30th, the WIFIA application was submitted on time, and then a notice for today's meeting for the public hearing for the WIFIA, the State Revolving Loan Fund program, was published on November the 5th. The Oversight Steering Committee reviewed the final GMP and projected rate adjustments and unanimously agreed to the project team's Phase 2 recommendations in a public meeting on November the 19th. And on November 26th, the staff shared the final GMP, Phase 2 recommendations, and projected rate adjustments with City Council in a workshop. That brings us to today's public hearing for the project and the Phase 2 recommendations. Staff is pleased to report that the Phase 1 outcomes are very favorable. The existing project team has performed remarkably. The Phase 1 project is under budget, within scope, and on time. The current guaranteed maximum price is locked in at $494.2 million, which is $14.1 million under the established budget at the 5% design phase and the WIFIA letter of interest. Other savings that have been found by Wichita Water Partners include $6 million in annual ongoing avoided costs for O&M compared to the 5% design and letter of interest, and a recent iteration of the unit cost reviews found another $1 million or more in savings that will be realized through construction of the plant. And it's important to note that the project savings have been built in here without sacrificing anything on scope. This plant will be fully redundant. It'll meet all targets for capacity, for resiliency, for superior water quality. It will provide a level of reliability and resiliency that we don't have or have never realized with the current plant. For instance, we'll be able to treat either 100% Cheney water or 100% groundwater independently of one another. That flexibility provides reliability in that if we were to, for some reason, lose one of our raw water sources, we would be able to meet our customers' base demands with a single source. Not only that, it leverages a lot in our drought resiliency package as well. We'll be able to meet our drought goals of managing through a 1% design drought with minimal impact to our customers sooner, more efficiently, and more economically. The project remains on schedule, especially for those important milestones that we have to hit to realize the savings that are built into the project. The WIFIA application was submitted on time. We're prepared to submit the State Revolving Loan Fund application. We're on schedule for the early works package to begin in January and start up commissioning in spring of 2024. As we were winding down the phase 1 work on the project and gearing up for phase 2, it was important for staff to really take the time and take a deliberate approach to understanding the value and the avoided risk with moving forward with the right project team. And we're pleased to be in the position to be able to recommend moving forward with both Wichita Water Partners and Garber Engineering. The current setup protects the city from potential cost increase. For instance, the negotiated risk allocation with Wichita Water Partners greatly reduces the risk-based contingency by at least half, if not more. We're protected from other cost escalations and increases due to market impacts, due to inflation, and those savings that are ensured by the early works package. Wichita Water Partners is a highly qualified team that currently has an obligation with the city to meet all the targets of this project. Moving forward with this team provides certainty with the WIFIA and SRF financing. Likewise, Garver Engineering brings a tremendous amount of expertise to this project. They played a key role in phase 1 in holding costs down, especially in optimizing the treatment processes and hitting water quality targets. In phase 2, they will perform critical work on construction management, inspections, and personnel available for administrative support. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the important input that was provided by the Project Oversight and Steering Committee. Membership of the committee is in place to represent the city's diverse customer base. Members include Wichita City Council members Brandon Johnson and Brian Fry. Derby, Kansas is the city's largest wholesale customer, and Kathy Sexton is the city manager of Derby and was the wholesale customer representative on the committee. Business and industry representatives included Andrew Nave with the Greater Wichita Partnership, Larry Pasinka with Spirit Aerosystems, Clint Cornejo with All Metal Recycling, and Don Sherman with Evergy. The committee performed important functions like cost reviews at strategic points throughout the process and provided input on site layout, on aesthetics, and also public accessibility to facilities. An overview of the phase 2 work that will be carried out includes negotiating and finalizing the financing terms of both WIFIA and SRF through the end of October in 2020. The construction process is set up in a 2-step phase so that 2 separate notices to proceed will be provided. This provides a dual benefit. First of all, the early works package in phase 1 will provide more than $6 million in project savings, and then City Council will be able to review the status of the project the final terms of the WIFIA and SRF financing before deciding to proceed with Phase 2 with construction through completion and startup of the project slated for September of 2024. At this point, I'd like to transition to the rate projections for the combined water and sewer utility and to provide the recommendations for fiscal year 2020. The slide that's being presented here is in a format that should be familiar to council. The projections are generated with a rate model that was provided by the city's water utility finance consultant, Raftelis. We keep one goal front and center on this, and that's to avoid sudden rate spikes, and we do that by gradually ramping up for large projects to hold those spikes down and levelize the rates. What you see here is inclusive of all of the water and sewer utility needs. The recommended adjustment for 2020 is 5%. If you were to look at the water and sewer separately, the adjustment for water would be 6.25%. The adjustment for sewer alone would be 3%. These revenue projections include funding for the Northwest Water Treatment Facility, for biological nutrient removal, for wastewater in the amount of $355 million, baseline CIP project needs for water and sewer, horizontal and linear assets for renewal and replacement in the amount of approximately $450 million. These projections also cover revenue needs for the day-to-day operations and maintenance of both water and sewer. Keep in mind that council would only be voting on the adjustment for fiscal year 2020 and that future refinements and projections will be presented to council each year prior to adopting the adjustments. One thing that we have to keep front and center when we're laying out our capital program and the revenue projections, and that's the wallet share of our customers. And what the table in front of you shows is what our customers could expect in 2020 with a recommended rate adjustment. You'll see here that for residential customers, the increase would be in the neighborhood of $2 to $7 a month, depending upon how much water they use. And likewise, for commercial and industrial customers, they would realize the same percentage adjustment, and it would vary depending upon the amount of water used. When considering customer impact and the Northwest Water Treatment Facility, it's helpful to consider that in the context of the optimized financing package. And what the bar chart in front of you shows is what the average monthly residential bill would look like with and without WIFIA and SRF financing. And what it shows is by the time the plant comes online in 2024, that our customers will be saving more than $20 a month on their monthly bill. And with that, I'd like to close this morning's presentation by providing staff's recommendations to approve the amendment to the Wichita Water Partners contract for all Phase 2 design and construction services, approve the amendment to the Garver contract to provide all Phase 2 owner's rep services, authorize the notice to proceed with Phase 2A of construction, close the public hearing and approve submission of the State Revolving Loan Fund loan application, place the water and sewer rate ordinances on first reading to adopt the recommended 5% adjustment for fiscal year 2020, adopt the amending resolution to reflect the full project budget in the amount of $553,187,535 and authorize all necessary signatures. This time I'd like to close. I'm available for questions. We have other city staff available for detail on various components of the project. We also have members of the Wichita Water Partners team here, including Mr. Ron Coker, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Water Division for Burns & McDonnell. We also have Dr. Stephen Jones with Garver for any input that's needed on the owner's rep services. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to council for questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Claycomb and then Fry.
I have a couple of questions, Don. Thank you for the presentation today. It's been very helpful. So today, if we approve this, where we've locked in the guaranteed maximum price and we've got the contract with the owner's rep. These other things, the energy power substation and the land acquisition and the Hess Reservoir improvements and the right-of-way and site improvements, those are estimates right now, budgets right now, or do we know for sure those are the costs?
That is correct. Those are currently estimates.
Okay.
And as we proceed through those projects, of course, we'll be looking for savings to bring those costs down.
Okay, and we're pretty confident that those are maximums?
Those are conservatively high, yes.
Okay, and then will the, and maybe this is a question for the manager, will the oversight committee continue to be a part of this process going forward?
Mayor, Councilmember, we haven't decided yet, but it may be that we'll ask them to continue as we are going through the construction process, similar to what we did with the oversight committee of the baseball stadium.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then I have a couple questions on the rate increases. The 2020 rate increase of 5%, we've seen this forecasted before, you know, every year we look out. Do you recall in last year what we were projecting for 2020? Was it the 5%?
Around 5%. The current projections are on target with what was shown previously.
What we had shown, okay. And this one, so now this is looking at rate increases going forward, and I know we're not voting on those today, but I want to get this straight. Since we've taken out the operate right now, the operate part of our contract, and we are just doing a design build, do we think that we'll need a consultant later to assist with that? And if so, will that increase our future rates? Could it increase our future rates?
Well, the plan for now and the path forward is one of the things with the new plant, we have the benefit of a very similar treatment process. And so we'll be able to proceed with operations of the new plant with existing staff.
Okay.
Through the transition period of startup and commissioning, we're looking for, potentially up to a 12-month period there. We could require a minimal amount of contract services for that process, but those additional O&M costs are included in the current rate projections.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excellent presentation. Great work on everyone's behalf. I do have a question on the owner's rep contract. So in the oversight committee hearings and in the workshop, it's been represented that we had about $22 million budgeted for that. When I look through the actual contract, we're deferring about $6 million. Some key things, I believe. What is the plan for adding those services back in, or what is that part of phase 2B that happens next year, or what is that plan?
That's a fair question. The current contract amount for Garver is $16.3 million. Those deferred items that you see were the result of the right sizing of the scope as we really drilled down with Garver to take a look at what the coordinates for the project were. And those items that are deferred are items that we're confident that some of those, like administrative support, some of those functions, review of invoices and things like that, we have capacity with city staff where we can perform some of those functions. Other items we believed were duplicative. For instance, Wichita Water Partners has a robust quality assurance and quality control program through a third-party service provider. We felt that having Garver duplicate those services was not necessary.
So when do we make that determination? Is that continual? I mean, do we revisit this next year and say we're putting too much stress and strain on staff? Because we've got to build this as well as operate the existing one, which has got duct tape and Band-Aids. And I worry that we're trying to do too much with our staff. And we've got one chance to do this right. I mean, it's a small piece of a big project.
Yes, sir.
And I'd rather have that assurance that we've got enough eyes on this and we're doing it the right way. So do we get a chance to review this and say, maybe we need to put this back in?
Yeah, believe me, I appreciate those comments. And we will, review and we will manage the contract with Garver and those services side by side with Garver. And we will have early notification if there are any red flags or an indication that we need additional resources. That's why those services are included in there as deferred, so we would have the ability to come back and request additional funding to carry out that work.
If I can, this has been a longer negotiation process with Garber, and I think Garber had some concerns at an earlier stage when we had even a lower contract amount, and that the city was looking at taking on too much responsibility, and so many of the issues that you're talking about now, Councilmember Fry, were addressed in negotiating that contract back up to include some services that we originally thought we would provide at a staff level. So I echo what Don's saying. I appreciate that concern, and of course, as we go forward, if we find that we need to add to this contract, we can bring an amendment to you going forward. But I think that especially identifying some work that was duplicative, and there was some work that actually was more relevant to phase 1 than phase 2, and so those items have been corrected in this final agreement brought forward.
As long as we have an opportunity to review this and address it later, and the rates are already established, correct? If we decide to put some of this stuff back in, that's part of the contract now. We've already got those rates established, correct?
That's correct. The higher contract amount is reflected in the rate projections that you see today.
I'm talking about if we add any of this deferred back in, those rates are already established in the Garber contract.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And what I would also encourage you to look at down the road, as you look at the needs of that particular contract going forward, we used to have the Department of Public Works separated between street and water and sewer utility. And is it something that we need to go back and look at and separate those two out because it needs its own special attention?
Good
And
suggestion.
if we're saying that we're understaffed, maybe that's one way to address that.
Good suggestion.
So, Councilmember Clendenin.
I'm going to go a little bit different direction. You mentioned, including with our rate increases, are the biological nutrient removal, the upgrades to, I'm assuming, Plant 2 South. That's another $350 million project that we haven't even dove into yet. What does that look like exactly, and when do you expect that to be something that we're going to start serious work on?
Right, so we will perform some work in 2020 to refine that project approach and what that will look like and establish a schedule. It'll also identify potential options that will meet the treatment targets at optimized costs. So we'll have more information on that in 2020.
I have plenty of citizens that are extremely concerned about this, obviously about the remediation of the smell down there to a huge population, but also like to take a lot of lessons learned over the past year as we approach another huge project. Hopefully we can apply that and make this a smooth process.
Yeah, I want to note that we've already had meetings regarding our approach going forward and preliminary work. We want to try to catch a WIFIA window while that program is still in existence, so we're working diligently in that regard. So when Don talks about work coming to you in 2020, it's going to be more than early preliminary.
So are the current rate increases that we're talking about taking into account the possibility of WIFIA savings?
At this point, yes.
They are at this point, okay. Thank you.
And just to add to that, you are collecting monies that you won't spend for many, many years. What are the projected investments that you're going to make off of those revenue streams that we're collecting? So you're basing your 30 years of rate increases on obviously the associated cost of operating the plants, the cost of building, the cost of financing, but you're accumulating quite a bit of money for probably a 10-year period, depending on what funding mechanism that you get before you make a payment to anyone on the sewer side of the operations. I'm guessing you're going to invest those dollars somewhere, and what are the projections of return that you're going to get based on the rates?
Mayor, good question. We, of course, have early cost associated with ramping up for those projects, but I'll let Ben Nelson from Public Works and Utilities talk about the pro forma.
Thank you. For the record, Ben Nelson, Public Works Utilities. You're right, and actually it's on the water side and the sewer side, assuming we get WIFI on BNR, but certainly for the water side, we gradually raise rates up to a point when we get the full principal and interest payments due for both of those projects, and we've got the rates and revenue coming in. But you're right, gradually we build up a little bit more cash along the way through that gradual rate increase. Instead of investing it and then generating returns on that investment, what instead we do with our pro forma is that we take any excess cash through that gradual rate ramp up, and we use that to cash fund CIP projects instead of issuing debt. And so basically it's not an investment, but it's an avoided cost of not having to issue debt on just our normal CIP projects.
So it probably saves you more interest than you would gain on investment.
Significantly more, yes.
Okay. Any other questions before we go out to the public? Doesn't appear to be any, so we'll open it up to those in attendance today. If you would like to address the council on this agenda item.
I am Sybil Drum. I reside at 326 North Walnut. I am concerned about the rates going up. There are low-income people. There are elderly people. We don't have all this money to be paying more on water. Yes, I'm a person that doesn't use the water very much. But I issue you not to vote on this because I am low income. I'm going to admit it. And I am elderly, and I already paid for water. And it's very expensive. So, and there's another reason. He talked about the sewage. When I was at Mount Carmel Apartments, the faucet had sewage coming out of it. So I know what Clendenin's saying. I just don't think you should be proposing to make the rates be higher. Because sometimes in the businesses, you don't do that to them. You do it to the residentials. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Excuse me, Doug Ballard, 920 Buffin. I've been here before you on this water treatment plan, and first of all, let me say I'm all in on the water treatment plant. Actually, in going through the facilities, I was under the impression that you needed a sewer plant worse than you needed a water plant, but we need both, so I won't argue there. But let me give you a little bit of history for those that might not remember. There's a couple of you that weren't here. A couple years ago, we had a bond issue that had a large portion of the bond issue, $250 million, as I remember, for a new source on water, and of course it got voted down, and now we don't need that. So it started raining. So then a little later on, we had a request for proposal for a water study, and then possibly negotiating with the same person to do whatever was in the study, and thankfully you did away with that part. That would have been a disaster. So now the study's over with, and one of the things, we need a new water plant. By the way, I was on a study or a committee in maybe 93 that was brought to from staff that said, hey, you know, we got a 50-year-old water plant, we need to start talking about that. But there were so many developers and realtors on the committee that all they were concerned about was keeping the rates low so everybody would want to come to town and build a plant. So, and I quit. I was less patient then than I am now.
So now we need a water plant. And we talk a lot about cost savings and everything. As a guy who worked for a contractor for 3 different contractors over 30 years, one of the best ways to save money is to put it out for bids. So I'm telling you, when you write a request for proposal on a $500 million water plant, and I will say, and this hasn't been really brought up, originally it was a design, build, operate. And I came to Mr. Fry and begged him if I could get one thing, to take the O out. That'd be disaster. That is the ABCs to privatizing public facilities, is build something and turn it over to them to run it for a while. And then after a while, oh, we don't know how to do that. So, and the mayor came in the office, somewhat agreed with me that that was a little bit of a problem, and you guys took it out. So I don't know how that happened, but it went away. Thank you for that. So we're now back to design build. One of the advantages of design build is you can get it faster. But on a $500 million plant, there's water plants in every city in the United States. They either buy it from somebody or they got one themselves. And they all got problems because we're way behind on that kind of infrastructure. Out of sight, out of mind. So anyway, we've done phase 1. We're up to 30%. I have no problem with the people that are doing it. I'm actually somewhat familiar with their names. Most of the guys I ever dealt with are gone now, but so I'm not opposed to them as doing the project. That's fine. But the other thing that is not very much is made of is that, number one, you only got 2 people. You took the operating out of the one customer that you knew could actually do the job, and he went away. That is a problem. The way you guys are writing those requests for proposals is flawed, big time. Even on the pools today, you got one bidder? Really? You only got one guy in town knows how to build a swimming pool? So I don't know what the problem is. I'm not sure it's right here, except you guys are the signers. It's someplace else. So anyway, I'm asking you.
So Doug, can you wrap up?
Yes.
Okay.
You own the 30%. Stop right now and put it out for bids. And if you can't get 3 prices, you just reword it until you do. I have a little bit more.
So you've used up your 5 minutes.
I know.
Can you do it?
It's the most important project you guys have done
And we have
since
other
you sat
people,
on the bench.
and we have other people that want to speak. So,
Do we? Okay.
So I'm happy to let you try and wrap up in 30 seconds.
Okay, you haven't addressed contamination. I have a database that has all of the results of water contamination in every plant or every water plant in the United States. Wichita has a good one according to federal regulations. The federal regulations that they're testing to are 1998. Some of those have not actually been changed for 40 years. And in this organization that EWG has a guide on safety water standards. It's never addressed in here, that we are in non-compliant, according to them, with 12 contaminants. First one is arsenic. According to them, we're 292 times what they recommend. And that's just, that's all science, I know, but I thought I would bring that up because quality has not been mentioned. So, anyway.
All right. Thank you, Doug.
Okay.
Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Mike Gibson. I'm Executive Vice President of Associated General Contractors of Kansas, reside 765 East North 2nd Street in Old Town. Associated General Contractors is the Chamber of Commerce for the construction industry here in Kansas. We represent those 325 Kansas construction firms and 9,000 employees. Hope your families had a great Thanksgiving. There's a lot to be thankful for the leadership and vision of this esteemed body, both from the mayor, city council, our Bob Layton and his professional staff, to have the vision and leadership to address the water needs for this community. In a former life, my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, deferred vision and leadership on water and sewer to the point that 7 years ago they were hit with an EPA consent decree that forced them to spend a tremendous amount of money on water and sewer infrastructure. This increase that you're dealing with pales in comparison to a consent decree. In fact, the city of Shreveport has been faced with over 50% increase in water rates for their citizens. I think a 5% increase compared to something that, of ignoring this particular issue with a consent decree from EPA would be catastrophic for low income and other citizens and businesses. So your vision and leadership, along with the support of staff, will avoid those type situations, which that hasn't been discussed very much over the last several months in terms of what downstream problems could occur if you don't address the upgrades that you're dealing with here. But as I testified in previous timeframes, this $500 million project, according to our chief economist, Ken Simonson in Washington, D.C., says that this is going to be a $2 billion economic stimulus for our community. We heard from Spirit Aerosystems and Textron about the return on investment that you're making in the aviation side of things. But $2 billion, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we will look back on for years to come and say, what a great decision that staff and policymakers made for this particular project. Not to mention the job creation, the tax base that goes along with it, and most importantly, and I'll close with this, we're very involved with high school students in vocational programming across the state. We have 125 partners in both high schools and community colleges. And the one thing that we keep hearing from our students in our high schools is there going to be a future in Kansas? I would suggest that the vote you're going to make on this particular project is going to send a huge message and reaffirm to our younger generation your confidence in local business and that there is a future for them. Because, ladies and gentlemen, right now, Kansas is 48th in the country for out-migration of population, and you're going to help reverse that trend by sending a message to our younger generation that Wichita, Kansas, and the Wichita metro area is a place to live, work, and retire. So thank you very much for your leadership and vision. I know that from sometimes the media doesn't portray some of these things, but business and industry and the citizens of Wichita are very proud of your leadership on this particular item. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. Next speaker.
Good morning, Mayor Longwell, council members. Appreciate the time this morning. My name is Andrew Weens, and I serve as Vice President of Government Relations at the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. I stand before you in that capacity today. Our address is 350 West Douglas Avenue, for the record. As you know, the Chamber is the dedicated champion for economic growth and community advancement in the Wichita region for our more than 1,700 business members and their employees. The Chamber asks you to support approval of the second phase of the city's contract with Wichita Water Partners. While I am not an expert on water treatment, like Councilman Fry, I'm basically qualified to turn on a tap. However, I can vouch for the experience of the Chamber's members. Wichita Water Partners is a first-class team with a tremendous amount of capability on water treatment issues forged by decades of experience. They have large water treatment plant experience as well as water transmission pipeline experience, with members on their team that have been a part of nearly every major water project in our community for the last 30 years. These are companies that Wichitans know and trust and that employ Wichitans And we are thrilled that this project is going to be advanced by a team that includes local businesses and workers. The team has more than 1,000 team members who are living right here in Wichita, so they will be using this water in the years to come. Additionally, we're glad to hear that the project proposal will save Wichita ratepayers money compared to what it would have cost, thanks to the work of the team and City of Wichita staff in undertaking extensive value engineering and process optimization work. So the team has worked hard to reduce the impact on ratepayers. Obviously, any rate increase is not fun to pay, but we know that this is an investment in the city's future. Quality of place is one of the Chamber's strategic priorities. Safe and plentiful drinking water certainly contributes to quality of place. So we believe the Wichita Water Partners will do an excellent job ensuring that our infrastructure is prepared to support economic growth opportunities, like some of the ones you guys talked about this morning with Textron Aviation, Spirit Aerosystems, and the other companies that are part of our community. Another of the Chamber's strategic priorities is diversity and inclusion, and this team is focused on diversifying their supplier network to ensure that local diverse talent has the opportunity to contribute. They've pledged to reduce barriers for small and minority-owned businesses to work on the project, and the team will provide training programs for area residents to acquire the skills to help build and operate the new treatment facility. So for all these reasons, we would ask you to support this, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you being here. Next speaker. Going once. All right, we'll bring the discussion back to the bench. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to address a few things as I continue to get emails. First, I'm continually asked about a connection with the Wichita Water Partners in Flint, Michigan, and I can say that during my time on the steering committee, I've seen no evidence of such a connection with Flint, Michigan and anything that happened there. And on that, my thoughts are still with those in Flint because of the tragedy that they will face for decades. I've also had questions about the process that led us here, and just want to remind, like I mentioned before, that the argument to change the process made sense to me, but it was changing the process, and originally I voted against that because I didn't want to see a process changed. Again, the argument made sense, but we had a process in place. Since then, the council moved forward. I support that, and with this new competition process with the water partners, they bid successfully for phase 1 and are looking for phase 2 today. I had the privilege of serving on the committee with Councilmember Fry, and during that time, I would say that the water partners have addressed all of my concerns that I had, whether that was ability to deliver in the first place, quality of product to be delivered. They even had a diagram where you could follow a drop of water through the plant, so you could see through some of the things that were brought up here by some folks in attendance that there was a quality product that would be there. We'd have a quality treatment plant, and unlike the one we have now, if something serious were to happen, this new plant would be able to continue to operate and deliver to Wichitans and other users of the water system that we have. Also specifically, one of the things I'm concerned about, I mentioned it last year, was working with women and minority-owned businesses, and I can say that again, on the steering committee, the water partners have delivered their commitment to diversify the workforce, work with local small businesses, and especially women and minority-owned businesses. And we've seen that team grow. You see new logos on every slide every time they present. They're keeping their word on making sure they work with local folks. And I think that hiring local is always good, creating those jobs. And the water partners went above and beyond and offered hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships to train Wichitans to get those jobs. And not only that, but encourage business development so that those same Wichitans can start their own businesses and grow from this. Those are things that I think are great. I've appreciated seeing that commitment. You don't always see that, so I'm appreciative of that. And some of the concerns we just heard, I've had a few emails about going forward with this team. In my opinion, I feel it's too risky for our funding opportunities. The lower rate increases, we see 5%. If we lose those opportunities, you could see 12%. And rate increases, as we said earlier, suck, but I definitely would rather see 5 than 12. I would love if lower income people didn't have to pay that, but we are now at 5%. And I think, again, that's better than 12, and it's too risky, in my opinion, to go back out. We've got $494 million facility. We don't know that we'll get that if we go out and rebid. It could be more. The risk to Wichita right now through the contract is if there's cost overruns, we don't have to pay that. If we go out and rebid, we could have to pay that, which could significantly increase the cost of this. And again, we don't know that we'll get the same quality or commitment to working with local companies if we go out and rebid. And so for those reasons, I'm going to move forward in supporting phase 2 with the water partners, because I don't want that risk for our city. I think we have a quality product that we could get, and we have a quality team working, and they're growing and trying to work locally. So I support it. I just wanted to put that out there to address some of the things that I've heard personally.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Mayor. Great comments. Councilmember Johnson. There are some in our community who would like us to slow down or even start over. We're past that. We've delayed and deferred this project for way too long. It's now time for action. A new water treatment plant is more important than an arena, an airport, Kellogg, library, convention center, performing arts center. Water, after all, is a basic necessity of life. It's the one thing, more than all the rest, which can determine the growth of our community. As many of you know, water infrastructure has been a priority of mine for many years, and I'm grateful to be involved in the process, and I've learned a lot along the way, more than just turning on a tap. And I will continue to learn as we go through the rest of this design, build, and operate phases. As it's been said before, this is the single largest capital improvement project our city has ever taken on at one time. So it's important we do it right, and we keep a close watch over the next few years as we work towards completion. And with the deferred items in the owner's rep contract, I strongly agree that we continue the oversight committee and its service. And it's been mentioned before as part of the original selection committee and then continued as the oversight committee. I've been impressed with Wichita Water Partners, their dedication, how they've listened to concerns and challenges of their proposal, and they've worked to develop solutions, specifically the EBE, DBE, and local vendor opportunities, design, build, and operational savings, as well as the commissioning. This plant has the redundancy, the resiliency, and will meet or exceed all of our water standards. It's time to do this. Thank you.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a few comments. First of all, as you may or may not know, I'm a public health professional, a 25-year public health professional, so water is certainly something that's keen on my radar and something that I've been watching carefully. And I also just wanted to mention that I've reached out to my constituents in District 2. I've talked to family members, community members, residents, as well as industry, and everyone has been supportive. I've had comments and questions, but when you have a dialogue and a discussion and people are able to better understand the complex issues, have heard nothing but support from my constituents. Also wanted to echo Councilmember Johnson that I think at this point it's just going to be too risky to pursue another option, especially if we could have to increase water use rates for our residents. It just wouldn't be fair. And then finally, I want to just give a really hearty thank you to city staff. I know that Public Works has been intricately involved in this, but also finance and probably more departments than I could even mention. And it's in addition to their normal duties and their job jar. So thank you to city staff for everything that you've done, and I'm going to be supportive of this.
Councilmember Claycomb.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few comments. I want to say that thank you to Councilmember Johnson and Fry for serving on the Oversight Committee. I think we should continue that, as I alluded to in my question earlier. I do want to say that I was very impressed with the commitments from the Wichita Water Partners to answer my questions about their capabilities, the quality of their work, the quality of our water, and just their dedication then to building a skilled workforce. And so I really appreciated that. I want to thank staff. I think they have taken, as Councilmember Tuttle said, in addition to their normal work, have taken this task on, and very important task, a task that is, as Councilmember Fry said, more important than any other project we're doing. So I really do appreciate that, and I think the risk of delaying is just too large, and so I will support this moving forward today.
Councilmember Clendenin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's been well. I think my objections early on to some of the process getting to this point has been well documented as far as our RFP and some of the changes I'd like to see in the RFP process. I'm going to continue to talk with you, City Manager, about some of the tweaks that we can make, I think, over some hopefully some lessons learned. We have some very, very big projects still within our water and sewer system that need to be done, and I think we have great opportunity. Doug, by the way, everything you said, you know my feelings on this. I appreciate you getting up and expressing some of the things that you expressed to me and some of the conversations we've had. I think you can look forward to me bending my ear some more in the future. I really do believe that Wichita Water Partners and the local people that we have working on this are extremely capable and able to do this project. There's no doubt in my mind that we have something that's high quality, that's going to meet our needs into the future. And I want to thank also Garver for being the owner's rep and making sure that everything's running smoothly and being kind of our impartial third eye on this project. I want to assure the city of Wichita we are going to have a quality product that we're going to have water well into the future that's going to meet everybody's needs but exceed them. And so I will be supporting this today, knowing, Mr. Manager, that I still have some smaller concerns, but some tweaks I'd like to make the RFP process, not just for this, but for projects in the future. I'm glad that we've gotten to where we are today. I want to thank Wichita Water Partners for a lot of the commitments that Councilmember Johnson had mentioned today with workforce development in our community. That's going to be extremely important. And so I will be supporting this today. Thank you to the citizens of Wichita for going through this process with us. And it's been, in some weird ways, nice to have all the engagement that we've had. Normally we don't have citizens that are this engaged in things such as water infrastructure. So thank you to the citizens as well.
Thank you, and the only thing I'll say is we have had great participation, and Doug, I appreciate something you mentioned today, that you had been lobbying hard to take the out of that process, because it is important that we run a public utility, and that's not how it's been portrayed, as you know, in the media over the last several months. But the citizens, you being one of them, and many others, were very concerned about the O side of the RFP, and I'm glad that we did change that. So I will turn it over to the two council people that served on the oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to make today's motion for this significant investment in our future. I move that City Council close the public hearing, approve the Phase 2 amendment with Wichita Water Partners, authorize the notice to proceed with Phase 2A, approve the Phase 2 amendment with Garver, authorize the submittal of a loan application for the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund, approve the recommended rate adjustment for 2020, place the water and sewer rate ordinances on first reading, adopt the amending resolution, increase the budget to $553,187,535, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Water production improvements, Hess Pump Station pump valve replacements.
For the record, Ben Nelson, Public Works and Utilities. Today we're recommending initiation of $1.5 million of budgeted CIP funds that would be added to an existing $2 million project budget, with the goal of replacing critical large valves that serve our high-service water pumping station. That pumping station is known as Hess. Hess serves a very critical role for our water utility. It sits adjacent to the current water treatment plant, and in between the water plant and HES are a series of 5 underground reservoirs. So the water treatment plant gets the water to drinking water standards, puts it into the reservoirs, and then HES takes the water out of the reservoirs, pressurizes it, and puts it into the distribution system for use to get the water delivered to our customers. That HES facility was built in 1974, so it's 45 years old, and a lot of the assets, including many of these valves, are original to that 1974 construction, so they're about 45 years old in many cases. These are large valves, 36, 48-inch, 72-inch valves, similar to what you see here. So they're a significant investment to make in terms of upgrading HES. In March, the City Council approved a $2 million budget to replace what are known as isolation valves that sit on each of the 8 pumps that are in HES pump station. Those isolation valves will be replaced, and what those do is they basically let us turn on or off independently any of the 8 pumps, which means that all of the other pumps can either remain in operation or on standby for redundancy. When we were doing the initial design following your approval in March of the isolation valves, we also identified some additional valves that are upstream immediately of the HES pump station over near those reservoirs, and those are also needing replaced. And so knowing that, we budgeted $1.5 million into this approved CIP. It's included in the rate projections. And if this is approved today, we'll replace a total of 36 valves. Some of those are the isolation valves on the pumps, and some of them are upstream on the pipelines that serve the reservoirs. It's also important to know, with the significant investment you just made in the prior action, HES Pump Station will remain our primary pump station for most of Wichita, even with the new water plant. So this isn't a stranded investment. It's something we plan on using for the next several decades. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? It's only a few $1 million.
Not 553 million, it's 3.5 total, so.
We'll
budgeted.
Bring the discussion back to the bench. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Year-end salary and classification ordinances.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Chris Bezruki, the HR Director. For your consideration and approval is a proposed annual wage ordinance and a position classification ordinance as well. These ordinances are reflective of the budget that you've approved for next year, and now I'll show you some of the highlights, I think. So the classification ordinances establish the City of Wichita's job classifications and corresponding pay ranges. We have about 800 or so of those. There are 2 classification ordinances, one for the exempt positions, exempt from overtime, and one for the non-exempt position, people that are eligible for overtime. The salary ordinances establish the pay range increases for 2020. That's either been previously established by the labor agreements that are in force or the budget that you have approved already. For most pay ranges, the pay rates are set by the union agreements reflective of the salary ordinance. Okay. And for next year, the general pay adjustment of 1.25% for all service employees international, that's SEIU, and also of 1.25% for all employees council that are non-represented and all other employees for other exempt and management pay ranges. A majority of employees will be eligible for a 2.5% merit increase based on good performance. Costs resulting from these revisions to the salary ordinance are consistent with the amounts included in the adopted budget for next year. And next week, we'll bring forward a few more labor agreements as well.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go out to the public. Anyone like to address the council on this agenda item? Looks like we've lost most of our audience. Did you run them off?
HR is so exciting.
We'll bring the discussion back to the bench. I would move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Cast your vote.
Thank you.
Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Is this the one you're gonna add?
Okay. So we have an off-agenda item that we need to take up.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. We've got an item related to, hold on, a public hearing that had been scheduled, and we inadvertently neglected to get the staff report to you and to have the item shown as was published for the public hearing. So we need a motion to open the public hearing, and then I think Mayor, you want to handle it from a procedural standpoint after
Right.
that.
So I will defer to the council member to take this item up because it was scheduled to be on today's agenda, but we really didn't give much notice. So, Councilmember Johnson, would you like to address that?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Pursuant to resolution number 19-443, adopted November 12th, 2019, we authorized a public hearing for December 3rd, 2019 for today's meeting. This item was inadvertently left off of today's agenda, and I move to add this item as an off-agenda item to be heard as item number 9 under new business.
I would second that. So we have a motion and a second to place it back on the agenda as it was published. Is there any confusion on that? Councilmember Clendenin?
So it was published, there was plenty
So it
of
was
public
published,
notice.
plenty of public notice.
That answers my question.
It was supposed to be on today. Contrary to what might be reported, the mayor didn't slide this one in on the last minute. So we have a motion and a second. Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. And even though it was published for today's council meeting, oftentimes people look for that agenda that comes out on Friday as truly the publication that they pay attention to. And so I would move that we defer this item for 1 week, I think, is plenty of time, so that we do give the general public sufficient notice that this agenda item is going to be coming before the council. So my motion would be to defer it 1 week.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to defer this item 1 week. Any other questions? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right, Madam Clerk, next item.
CON 2019-00034, conditional use amendment to CON 2004-00030 to expand area for vehicle sales on property zone limited commercial, generally located on the east side of South Broadway Avenue and within 1/4 mile south of East Terry, 1728 South Broadway.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Very fine job. And before we get started on this, I think Councilmember Clendenin would like to be recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Since there is no public hearing on this here today, I'd like to save us and staff time and make a motion that we send this item back to the Planning Commission. Reason for that is they will be hearing the new neighborhood plan, and I feel like I would at least like them to hear this with some new information from the neighborhood based on the new neighborhood plan that they're going to be hearing at their next meeting. So it may or may not change their decision, but that's
Fair
my
enough.
reasoning.
All right. So motion to
The
defer
motion
it
is
to the Planning Commission.
send
I
back to
will
the Planning Commission.
second that. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item.
Second time.
Council member appointments and comments.
Any appointments to take care of first? No appointments, any comments? No comments? You guys are still on a turkey high? Or low, yeah. All right, I would move that we adjourn today's council meeting.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. We do have a workshop, don't leave. Yeah, we'll take a break. So motion and second to adjourn, cast your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Before we get into the workshop, is 5 minutes long enough, 10 minutes?
A one function break.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do a 10-minute break.
Determined by task.
You can use your phone, you can use the restroom, whatever, one function.
One function break. That's all. We are back to our workshop meeting after our council meeting, and I'm just going to turn it over to Robert Layton.
Mayor, thank you. We're 15 minutes earlier than we would have been on last Tuesday when we were going to do this item. But anyway, this is an opportunity to give you an update on the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. Just a reminder that when we entered into this program, we were one of a number of cities that were accepted into the demonstration or pilot program. I'm not sure we fully understood the nature of being in a pilot program when we first entered it. And so there have been a lot of twists and turns as we've moved through implementation and work with HUD. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Sally to give you some background information and to bring you up to speed of where we are today.
Well, good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Sally Stang, Housing and Community Services Director. I'm here to provide you the update on the Rental Assistance Demonstration Project in the Public Housing Program, RAD. To give you some background, it's been quite a while. The RAD program allows public housing authorities to convert its public housing to a Section 8 platform. The reason agencies want to do this is to have the ability to leverage funding to do capital improvements on the projects. So for about the last 20 years, HUD has been underfunding the public housing program, both in operations and in capital fund. This disinvestment has caused a $26 billion backlog of deferred maintenance and capital needs across the country. To rectify this, HUD was looking at creative ways to allow housing agencies to try and help themselves. Under the public housing platform, properties are prohibited from carrying debt, which made it very difficult for housing authorities to be able to pull together the money necessary to do capital improvements. By converting under RAD, a project moves to a Section 8 platform, which removes the declaration of trust and that restriction on debt and allows the project to pursue financing in order to do those much needed repairs. So through RAD, we're able to convert to either project-based vouchers or a project-based rental assistance contract, similar to the private market. The term is for 15 to 20 years, depending on the type, and there's a mandatory renewal for a second term. So we're looking at 30 to 40 years of rent assistance guarantees. The RAD rents, though, are capped by HUD to the current amount that the project receives for its operating subsidy and its capital fund and the tenant rent. In essence, HUD wants to ensure that by the conversion, they're not going to have to invest more subsidy than they currently are. But they do allow what they call rent bundling, which is to move rent capacity between properties. So if you have a particular project that has more capacity than needed, it can be moved to one that has less. So the background for our RAD project is, this has been 2.5 years in the making. February of 2017, the Housing Authority Board, City Council approved the RAD application, which was then approved by HUD in October of 17. October of 17, Gill Group was hired as our RAD consultant, and March of 18, KBK Enterprises was chosen as our co-developer partner. Another side component of RAD, and actually of all HUD-funded assistance, is a Section 3 requirement. Section of $9.5 million, a HUD 221D4 loan, which is a loan specifically for significant rehabilitation or new construction with Red Capital, the seller's note, which is the housing authority selling the property to the partnership, deferred developer fees, CDBG loans, capital fund loans, and a KHRC Housing Trust Fund grant. The project is pretty inclusive, replacing doors, windows, plumbing fixtures, electrical components, sprinkler systems, heating systems, water heaters, fire alarms, flooring. It's pretty much a redo of every building. Okay. Well, why are we here? Why are we stalled? In July of 2018, following the architectural review, it was determined that there wasn't enough rent under the RAD cap to cover the significant investment needed and the debt service that would be needed for the rehab. So it wasn't going to generate enough money long-term to pay the debt service that would be necessary. So as a solution, the team put in a rent bundling request to HUD to move some rent capacity from the scattered site project to the senior project so that it could borrow the money necessary to do the repairs. So that was borrowing just over $72,000 a year in rent. HUD approved the rent bundling request in August of 2018, but one caveat to that was if you put in a rent bundling request, the project that has the money, that is giving the money, has to close first. Again, HUD's trying to protect that there's not an increase in the amount of subsidy that's going to be necessary, because if they allow you to close on the project receiving the funds and the other project fails, their subsidy would then increase. In December 2018, the tax credit application, along with Bank of America's letter of intent to be the equity investor, the tax-exempt bond volume cap application, and a $1 million application for housing trust funds were submitted to KHRC, the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. In 2019, they awarded the 4% tax credits. In April of 19, the bond cap was awarded, and in June of 19, they awarded only $500,000 in the housing trust funds. However, another bump in the road, in June of 2019, Bank of America withdrew its letters of intent as equity investor due to changes in the Community Reinvestment Act requirement for Kansas, and no fault of the project. So local lenders have a requirement to invest in low-income neighborhoods. The Federal Reserve mandates the amount of annual investment required, and those amounts shift. So for Bank of America, the amount shifted down for Kansas, and they no longer needed the projects in their portfolio. From June of 19 through October of 19, we approached multiple investors, and we did receive a letter of intent from Boston Capital on the senior project only. At that point, our co-developer partner recommended that we close RAD on both projects so that we could proceed with the senior project. But due to the rent bundling and the reduction in rent capacity from the scattered site single-family home project, we were not comfortable and we rejected that path. We felt we would be stuck with a portfolio of single-family homes with even further restricted rents that would be even more challenging to deal with going forward. Our savior, on September 4th, 2019, HUD issued a new initiative, an incentive, for up to $100 per unit bump for RAD projects with substantial rehabilitation and opportunity zones. In October 2019, we submitted a request to HUD to receive that $100 per month increase for the 86 units at Greenway Manor, as it falls within an opportunity zone. But like most things with HUD, they put out this incentive and they had no plan on how to initiate it. So we have been jumping through hoops to get this approved. They've responded, we qualify. However, because this is new funding, it can't be formally committed until Congress passes either an omnibus or a minibus. They can't commit it under a continuing resolution. So we continue to wait for the formal approval of those increased rents. Those increased rents, though, will permit us to unbundle the rent and put the $72,000 a year in rent capacity back to the single-family project. So in October of 2019, we received a second letter of intent, this one from Affordable Housing Partners, which is the investment arm of Berkshire Hathaway, to be the equity investor for the senior project only. We've also received the conditional commitment from Oryx Red Capital for the 221D4 loan. And however, our tax credits and our bond volume cap expire on December 31st of this year. We need to formally request an extension, and we've had conversations with KHRC, and they have indicated support to carry those forward into 2020. So that's where we land right now with the senior project. Good news, we can most likely get that project going forward. The second project, 352 single-family homes located throughout Wichita. So as you can see in the map, they are truly scattered. Yellow pins, both the yellow pins and the targets represent single-family homes. Okay, this project is originally scheduled to be a $37 million project. We were looking for $10.6 million in 4% low-income housing tax credit equity, a senior lender for a 221D4 loan of $11.5 million, the seller's note, the property from the housing authority to the project, and then deferred developer fee. Pretty comprehensive, similar to the senior project, to repoint brickwork, new windows, ramps where needed, the heating systems, water heaters, electrical systems, gutters, downspouts, insulation, doors, kitchen, flooring, smoke detectors, pretty comprehensive rehabilitation. However, this project, because of the rent bundling request, was going to be subject to that rent reduction. But we're looking to reverse that at this point. But in December of 2019, it was determined that 146 of those units, as you can see on the map, were too scattered to qualify for federal housing financing. And when speaking with HUD and the FHA side of HUD, they feel they're too scattered, which makes them too difficult and expensive to maintain and manage, and therefore doesn't qualify. Again, this is one side of HUD not talking to the other side of HUD to make programs work together. In March of 19, a waiver request of that regulation was submitted to the Fort Worth field office, but that request was denied. So after that denial, it was proposed to take the one single 352 unit project and divide it into two projects. One with the 206 units that meet HUD's definition of scattered site and could qualify for FHA financing, and one with the remaining 146 units that HUD has deemed too scattered. Another option proposed was to elevate that waiver request to HUD headquarters, and that's still in our back pocket at the moment. We approached Interest Bank to consider conventional financing of 146 units, and we continue to have that conversation, but they're requesting the per unit specifications on the 146 units, which has yet to be determined. We should have those by the end of the month. In June of 2019, Bank of America's withdrawal of its letters of intent left the project with no equity partner. And although we approached multiple equity investors, we've had no success. Most of them quoting the same thing HUD quoted: scattered site properties are too expensive to maintain and manage, and too much of a risk. The tax credits and bond volume cap also expire on December 31st, and without a viable project, we can't justify requesting an extension at this time. So we went back to take a look at some other projects. HUD has confirmed they've closed some RAD deals with scattered site single-family homes, but none with the sheer volume that we have, and none using tax credits. Some examples from other housing authorities faced with the same dilemma. The Lake County Housing Authority in Illinois submitted for RAD for 276 single-family homes. They were unable to secure financing, just rescinded RAD and left their public housing with no rehabilitation and still under the public housing platform. Baltimore, Maryland, boy, we thought we had a big portfolio, has over 1,000 single-family homes. They also were unable to secure financing, and they're using Section 18 demolition and disposition and are auctioning single-family homes and transferring the rent assistance to new construction of multifamily complexes. And Knoxville, Tennessee has closed a couple of RAD scattered site deals, but very small ones, an 81-unit duplex property and a 60 single-family home property as separate projects and rehabilitated with only capital funds. So this is not a challenge that isn't being seen by most housing agencies across the country. Many agencies have gone through RAD, and it's generally on these larger projects that can secure the tax credit funding. So our recommendations moving forward with the senior project is to move the senior project forward, being able to close RAD on just the senior deal because we'll be unbundling the rents. However, there is a financing gap. Part of it stems from HRC only funding $500,000 in housing trust fund dollars, and then some additional increases in costs since the original construction estimates were completed. But we need, and what we're looking to do is to commit home funds over the next 2 years, so that would be 2020 and 2021 funding for home funds. We'd need to have KBK Enterprises execute the letter of intent with.
Can you stop there for a second? What were those home funds traditionally committed to?
So generally, our home funds go into single-family development. The deferral would cost us about 7 units a year over 2 years. But the plan on phase 2 for the single-family homes could offset that a little bit.
Is that what we've been traditionally given to Mennonite housing? And
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I'll suggest this again, and I don't know if they're still interested, but we have a local developer who's been very successful at getting state-issued tax credits to develop housing of this nature. I think that's still an opportunity when it comes to single-family housing.
We're going to talk about that next, about the single-family piece.
There was a suggestion I made several years ago that no one liked then.
There's a little bit of an issue with the 9% tax credits, but we'll come back to that.
We'll get there. We would need to have KBK execute the letter of intent with AHP. We need to update the environmental reviews and the capital needs assessments because they're now over a year old and out of date. We need to submit the financing plan to HUD, and all of this would take time, and we would be looking at a March or April 2020 close on the senior side.
So in updating the CNAs, it could go up even more.
It absolutely could. We don't expect the needs to have deteriorated much in a year, and much of what did we were dealing with in our regular operations. Yes. So there's recommendations for the single-family project. I think we need to reevaluate and restructure the entire project. We are working with the architect. We have actually building plans for all 352 units. So we can take a look at every individual property condition and cost to rehabilitate. I have had issue from day one. I don't want us to be investing more money than some of these projects that are going to be worth, especially the ones located in floodplains that have structural deficiencies. We really need to look at other ways of dealing with those. I think we should use Section 18, demo dispo, to dispose of possibly any unit that is in very, very poor condition, along with the 146 units that are deemed too scattered for FHA financing.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Here? So it looked like a lot of the scattered houses were in southwest Wichita in my district.
We see actually the biggest bundling in group is in northeast, just northeast of downtown.
Okay. When I looked at your map there a while ago, I thought you had several of them in southwest.
They're all over the place. They definitely are all over.
So whenever we go to do the work on the houses, are we doing an appraisal? Are we looking to make sure we're not making it cost prohibitive? We're doing more work on the house than what the actual value is, what you could dispose. I guess my concern is the 146 houses. If they were in southwest Wichita, there's not a lot of houses that are older than 1950. So I would just, I mean, do we ever think about just disposing some of them and selling them to the public?
That's what we're getting to here with this idea too.
Okay, but you do run an appraisal on every house before you
We do
the
a
work?
capital needs assessment. We've ordered, the
But do you-
appraiser has determined the amount of the loan, yes.
So you do an appraisal to make sure that we're not underwater on the houses?
Absolutely. And it wasn't in the original plan, to be honest with you. The original plan was we're going to dump as much money as needed into
Well,
holidays.
that's where my,
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't look real responsible when I looked at the first part of it.
Right. And that's why I said from the get-go, I was a little concerned that we would be dumping more money than they're going to be worth when they're done. Definitely a concern.
So can we get a list of the houses that are out there and what they're appraising for? I mean, the volume numbers, when we're talking millions, it's very hard to understand.
Yeah.
Could we get a line item to where this is the house, this is the value, this is what we'll put into it, this is what it would be worth in the end?
That's exactly what we're trying to have done by January 1st, is that assessment, that listing of the current value, what we think the value will be post-construction, what it's going to take to get it there. And that's what we're putting together now. We need a better idea of the condition of every single home, what it's going to take to rehab.
As well as the 146 that we'd like to dispose?
All of them, not just the ones that I have structural concerns with, but all of them, absolutely.
Okay.
And the idea to use Section 18 to dispose of them, which it could mean demo, it could mean disposition, absolutely. We could dispose of them by using our community housing development organizations, our CHODOs like Mennonite and Habitat, those type of organizations. We could turn those, sell those properties at market value to those organizations. So that they can turn around and make them for affordable home ownership, and then we can transfer the subsidy and try and build something new. So the idea there would be we'd have about 170-ish units that we would be looking to either demo if they're in poor condition, or dispose of, sell. We would need to keep them in the affordability. HUD requires that they maintain their affordability covenants, but that can be affordable home ownership, absolutely. We could use our community housing development organizations to identify, which properties, how much do they need to turn them around, and identify buyers.
Okay, so when you say dispose, just so everybody understands.
Yes, just dispose.
You mean sell, not necessarily tear down or scrape the lot. Okay.
Yes, dispose. We usually demo, they call it the demo dispo covenant. So some of them may end up getting demolition because they're in such poor condition, but others we would look to sell, definitely. And then any proceeds would have to come back to the new project. So the idea there would be about 170-ish units we think we would be taking out of the public housing portfolio, out of this round of construction, turning them over into the market through CHODOs or land bank, and then doing one-for-one replacement housing. I don't recommend a 170-unit building. I recommend maybe 3 smaller mid-rise complexes, possibly strategically located in opportunity zones or other areas in the community.
Sally, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
And I'm still new, so I'm sorry. I'm writing that card for a whole nother month. But the 170 homes that are going to be sold or torn down, are there people in them now, and what's going to happen to them?
Absolutely. Some of them will have people in them at the time we make this decision. They're all covered under the Uniform Relocation Act. Actually, they have first, if we do decide to dispose of them, they have the first right to purchase before we make them available to anybody else.
Sure.
Most
so
can't afford
yeah,
to.
if they can't, and
Right.
then we sell the property, the new landlord, owner, whatever, could raise the price. Maybe they can't afford. Where are they going to go?
Under Section 18, the HUD provision that allows this, they would receive tenant protection vouchers. So they'd receive a voucher for rent assistance and could go anywhere they want under the Uniform Relocation Act. And we would work with our relocation coordinator to help them find some other place to live.
So out of the, I'm just curious, out of the 170 homes, how many of them are occupied?
As of right now, our scattered sites, because we've been working towards this project, we have not been refilling, at HUD's request, not been refilling units. The scattered site properties are operating about 35% vacancy right now. And by the time we get to actually getting through the process with HUD to get approval, to go through demo dispo, it's more time is going to go by. I would be surprised if they were more than half filled at that time.
So 80-some
Yeah.
families.
Exactly.
and we have a place to put them?
Yes, yes. HUD would be granting us, in that case, those relocation vouchers. But then they would have the first right to come back to any new property that we also build. So they would be the first ones to have right to that.
Thank you.
No problem. So the building one-for-one replacement just moves the rent subsidy that was tied to those units to anything new that we either build or buy. And then we, like I said, we can turn those units over. And I see it as a very positive opportunity because we're expanding the number of affordable units in the community by making more affordable homeownership opportunities at much less of an expense than we're even investing with home. Right now, when we do a new infill unit, we're investing about $50,000 in development funds and then another $20,000 per unit in down payment assistance. So we're only getting about 1 unit per $70,000. In this case, yes, we're going to divert about 1.1 million. We're going to be getting, 170-ish, 150 to 170 new units for homeowners. So we're getting a much bigger bang for our buck directing the funds the other direction. So the remaining 180 units, I would recommend we break those down into smaller portfolios. Banks and investors get nervous on scattered sites. Too difficult to maintain, too difficult to manage. We could use multiple repositioning strategies. RAD, as we all know it, the rental assistance demonstration, so converting those to Section 8 type contracts. Section 22 was just released in March of this year, and it is used when there are only 250 or less units remaining in a public housing portfolio, and it would allow us to convert those units using tenant protection vouchers in which the rents are no longer capped by the RAD rents, which allow us higher debt service if we were to do that. We could use multiple finance strategies, HUD or conventional loans, 4 or 9% tax credits, Federal Home Loan Bank's affordable housing program or other weatherization grants. And then I do show here a comparison of the 9% versus 4% on a 60-unit project. So this is just to kind of give you a visual. If we had a 60-unit project and went and did a competitive application for 9% tax credits, yes, we would receive much more equity up front. And the 9% is set at 9%, where with 4%, there's a varying rate, right now going at 3.4%. The challenge for us, though, is finding an investor who's willing to put up that amount of money. We have, right now we're challenged to find an investor willing to put up $10.6 million and having rights to 352 units, asking them to put up $9.7 million with only 60 units. I suspect that's going to be very, very challenging. Does it mean we don't try? I think we can try.
Can you break it down even smaller?
You could. The problem being scattered site, maintenance and management, even in a multifamily building, in order for it to operationally pencil, to have a professional housing manager on site, to have the type of maintenance. In a multifamily building, I never recommend you drop under 40 units to get that economies of scale. For scattered site, I wouldn't drop below 60 to be able to operationally perform. So that's really where we are at this point. And to quote Councilmember Frye, just like the water project, I think we've deferred and delayed this project. We definitely need a path moving forward. And I stand for any other additional questions.
Questions? I mean, it's unfortunate. There was so much excitement when this was announced. My goodness, 2.5 years ago.
We're prepared to bring the home amendment to you next week, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Because it's 2020 money, we don't have to bring it back that quickly.
Okay. It'll come to you somewhat soon.
Yes.
And then I think we have a path forward. It's a matter of deciding among options. But the good news is, when it's all said and done, we're hoping to have more affordable units than we had originally. So I think that's the good takeaway from all
You want to
this.
have more?
More affordable units.
More affordable, yes.
They may not all be public housing units, but they'll be in the hands of Chodos and others. Yep.
Right.
I kind of felt like from the presentation, you're right-sizing some of the areas. Is that an accurate assessment, or?
I don't know that I'd use right sizing, just simply, we have such a need for affordable housing, all
So the
levels of
need's
affordable
not
housing.
going down any?
The needs are increasing, definitely, not just for those, it's at all levels, those under 30% area median income, 50, 80. So I think this is a strategy where when we put more units available for affordable home ownership, we're filling a little bit more of that high, moderate income gap, but then are able to rebuild new high quality assisted housing for those at 50 or 30%.
What's some of the
area median
highest
income.
rent?
I'm sorry?
What's some of the highest rent?
Under the current proposal, it's really, really low. The RAD rents are capped, and so our rents in that arena are much lower than they are for the market. So we're looking at about $400 a unit on a one bedroom, and that's full rent, that's subsidy plus the tenant side of the world. Some of them are 600. The rent bump in Greenway will assist with that, but our scattered site single-family home rents, we have 26 bedroom units, and they rent for like $900 a month, which is nothing on a 6-bedroom house.
So you're wanting to do more of those?
No, actually, we're looking to get out, reduce the number of scattered site, single-family homes we have, and do small complex, more manageable.
That's where I was going with my
With the right sizing?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go back, you look in history, I mean, public housing started out like barracks, then they went to the high rises like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor homes. And then in the 70s and 80s, they went to the scattered site model, which was have less impact on neighborhoods. But in the end, they found out it costs so much more to operate.
I think there's so many people out there already in the $800 to $900 range. I think you'd want to, like you said, continue to focus on that, on the maybe a little lesser rent opportunities, because those are kind of the homes I think that you get into that aren't as well taken care of, and the margins that slim, it's hard for private investors to be able to make a return on that.
Exactly. So go into a mid-rise, smaller density, but yet get some of that economies of scale.
So how often do we survey our community in terms of what the people are paying as part of a percentage of their income and rent?
So we get that from the Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy group, and they do that about every 4 years. The last report came out in 2013, so we should be seeing the report soon. That goes from 13 to 17. They haven't released it yet, but we do have the numbers. It's part of our consolidated plan on the community.
So they do it every
development
4
side of the
years,
house.
but they release it every 27 years?
It takes them like 2 years.
My
They
Lord.
get the data for that 4-year period, and then it takes them about 2 years to release the report. So we're always using a little bit of stale data. But our consolidated plan that was just approved in 2019 includes that updated information. And the numbers are actually pretty staggering, that we have 14,000 households that are paying more than 50% of their income for rent.
Yeah,
And almost 9,000 owners that are paying more than 50% of their income for housing costs. Those are the numbers as they were through the period that ended in 2013. So I don't see that changing drastically with the number of new affordable units that are being
But
built.
that tells you the need's out there.
Huge need out there, definitely.
James, did you have something to say, or are you just the wheels spinning?
The wheels are spinning. I'm frustrated with our federal government right now because there's, on one hand, they want to do mixed income neighborhoods and they want to give people this neighborhood feel and put mixed incomes together and diversify how we do housing. But on the other hand, they're forcing us to go back to the projects of old and, large high-rise units where you breed crime and you breed all sorts of things and kind of packing it all together. And so it's pretty frustrating seeing us have to go back to that model based on their inability, I guess, to talk to one another and keep their own messaging consistent or their own thought processes. So my biggest concern is, since we're moving forward with the senior housing portion of this, that's great. I get notes from people stop me all the time about Greenway Manor and some of the similar facilities, just mold issues to all sorts of things that you see that are maintenance issues. I get a lot of it's deferred. We're trying to catch up. Money's a big issue. What are we going to do in the future to make sure once these units are done, and even the new units we may build, you know, for some of the families, what are we putting in place to make sure that quality of life through maintenance and keeping an apartment in a good living condition for families is optimal?
Councilmember Clendon, very good question. So unlike public housing and its structure over the years, these will be structured like private affordable housing projects, and we'll have a required replacement reserve from day one. So there'll be, and that's part of the operational pro forma going forward, is making sure that we're able to fund that replacement reserve going forward.
Will there be any private groups owning these, or will they all be owned by us?
So under a tax credit project, the investor, the equity partner, is a 99.99% owner, with the general partner being the Wichita Housing Authority. After the 15-year compliance period, we'll have the option to have those properties. Generally, your investor partner wants out. Once they're off the hook for tax credit compliance, they don't want to own them anymore. They can't carry any losses on their books, and they want to turn them back over. So the way those agreements are originally written are so that we can have the properties come back to the housing authority after the compliance period. Now the other, if we're not using tax credits, they'll be structured very similarly, depending on how we build the capital stack for financing.
And just to add to that, generally, when the tax credit runs out, they come back to potentially city ownership at really no cost. I mean, it's just a transfer of title.
You have to watch how your partnership agreements are written. Oftentimes it's in exchange for existing debt. So the partnership is actually paying for the properties as they are, and that debt gets repaid on a cash flow basis. So many of those agreements are written that exchange for the debt from the original entity. They just get the property back at the end. That's the way I recommend that it be written.
I'm just mostly I'm concerned about making sure that these places are maintained in a way that we would maintain our own homes, and that the people living in these that are, in many cases, they're forced to live in these conditions, just treated with dignity and respect through our own maintenance program.
Sure.
So.
Well, we'll also be we'll be having them privately managed by a professional management company.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are we privately managed now?
We are not.
Yeah, that's
we
what
are
I
not.
thought.
Projects that run on this slim of margins can't afford to have city
Private
management, to be honest with you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand what's going to come forward to us. I get the senior project, that one, we've got a good plan for that one. The single family, we're going to be asked to use the Section 18 to dispose of or demolish, and then those remaining 880 units, we'll keep those. Is that right?
180 units.
180. I'm sorry, 180.
At this point, yes, we would be looking to find a financing mechanism to keep those.
Then we'll look at these financing
And if we can't, then we
strategies.
have to, cross that bridge when we come to
Okay,
it. But
so-
we do believe we may be able to find an equity partner on that one, because they do meet HUD's definition of scattered site and can secure HUD 221D financing. The fact that we're looking at setting them up as smaller projects will give them a little bit more comfort. So we're going to attempt that.
And then we'll look at that 9%.
We'll evaluate the
Or
9%
4%.
versus 4%, the conventional versus HUD financing. But at this point, the biggest goal for us is to get that unit by unit value, cost, expense to try and determine what units it makes sense to demo, what units it makes sense to dispose of. We'll most likely have to go to the HUD office in Chicago, which handles the Section 18 demolition and disposition. My recommendation would be to meet with them up front, get them on the same page so that they can help guide us through that process. Because this looks like it's going to end up being multiple repositioning strategies. We want to make sure that we're doing them in the right order so that we make sure we don't end up losing rent assistance that can be transferred and those sort of things. So we have a lot of things to get done, but it's just time. We need to try and tackle it in a different way.
So it sounds like the senior project, we have a path forward on it that we know what it is. Single family is going to be, okay, we're going to do this, and we'll see how that works, and then we'll do this and see how that works. And we'll try to do this and see how it works. Okay.
And you know, some of the staging might be beneficial too. One of my concerns coming in was the local capacity to be doing this senior project at the same time as the scattered site. So the fact that we're going to put some time and some space in there may actually work out better for the community. I've heard from WABA and some others that there were some concerns that there would be enough construction capacity. So that will definitely help.
Thank you for your work on this. I know this is a difficult project, so thank you.
Are we good?
I just have one more comment. I think we're gonna have to, I'm just thinking in my head, like, how this is gonna work, and I know you'll do a great job, but like the potential optics of people living in homes that we displace and then we demolish, you know? I mean, that story's gonna have to be tendered carefully so that people understand what exactly is happening and that people are going to other places. Do you understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's not...
The care of our existing residents is our #1 priority.
Absolutely. So I think we probably need to be really proactive and get ahead of it rather than, you know, kind of wait and see what happens, because it's not a good optic at all.
It is not. And honestly, all of the residents are frustrated with the delays also. So we try to keep them up to date on what's going on, meet with them regularly, and give them their options and help them decide, because sometimes they do have options. And it's not just what we're doing to them. They get to select where they go.
And thank you for choosing Wichita. We're
I
lucky
think
to
the
have you.
city-
Thank you.
I think the city manager has extra bedrooms now.
I think he does too. I actually still own 2 homes, so.
And I also want to state too, just for the record, I'm just amazed at the Housing and Community Services team. They've been really resilient through a very tough time, and their hard work and dedication really shines through.
Now, we don't have to give them a raise since you praised them so much.
I don't think that's how that works.
Oh.
We approved that today.
Oh, darn it. All right. If there's nothing else, I think that wraps up.